Welcome to 8 Cubes, the show where two of Marvel Snap's best players talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap. I'm KM Best. He is Lamby Series. We're going to start with White Widow, who I think, might be the strongest card coming out this month, especially in the context of the current metagame, which is so heavily oriented around using Clog as a counterbalance to not just cards like Angela, but more specifically combo decks like Phoenix Force, Hela, Living Tribunal, and Mr. Negative, which means White Widow will have an immediate home in things people are already doing, using cards like Professor X, using cards like Cannonball, Sentry, Annihilus, making her what seems like a pretty strong card right off the bat. Now, White Widow is a 2/2 that adds a Widow's Kiss to the opposing side of the board. Widow's Kiss is a 0/0 with an ongoing ability that gives it -4 power as long as the location it's on is not clogged up. And so what that means is it has both synergy and no synergy with clog stuff. When you're clogging, you end up in a situation where you're not going to get that -4 power most of the time, but you are, still putting a rock on their side of the board with very little downside. The other thing this card lets you do is be played a little bit late in the game. So there's like a no downside. I get to try to clog you up, and if you don't fill this up, well, you get that rock or the Widow's Kiss when it's not on. And if you do fill that lane up, I don't have a goblin sitting on my side of the board. Lamby, what do you think about White Widow?
So there are two things that I want to talk about when it comes to White Widow. Firstly, yes, I'm excited for the card. So the first thing I want to talk about is like something I mentioned a bit in the previous video as well, which is best in slots. Like for clock decks, right? Like what you want to do on turn one, usually you play a hood, and that's great. But on turn two, usually you don't really know what to do. You play the demon, then you float the one energy, and then you'll be like, oh, I was gonna go 5+1 on turn six anyway. But now with White Widow, you can just play the White Widow on turn two, and it's just gonna be great, right? Because when it comes to the clock strategy, it's like firstly, okay, yes, Widow's Kiss does go on the opponent side of the board, clock them a bit, and they'll be incentivized to fill up the location because they don't want that -4 to affect them, right? So even if they do fill it up and you're playing a clock deck, it doesn't matter because the whole point of your deck is just to fill up their location anyway. And if they are like gonna do it for you by playing more cards there, well, you're not gonna complain. Plus, White Widow actually does have a body of a 2/2, which is relevant for sure. So I like this card in a clock deck, and I really hope and I believe that it would be the best in slot 2 cost card for that archetype. It's like how in this card, like Proxima came out and bam, every discard deck has Proxima. I'm down for that for clock. I think clock needs like time to shine, and it's gradually getting there. But I think with White Widow, it will be a bit better as well. And also one more other funny thing that I really want to do, just because it's not been done for a long time, probably not the best thing ever, but I want to play Galactus. Like I
Oh
want to
God.
I want to just put a -4 on their side, and it doesn't really matter if it ends up being a -4 or 0, because the point of putting a -4 on your opponent's side of the board early is it helps you gain prio to do the Galactus thing, right? So I'm a bit excited to try out Galactus again, and whether it ends up being great or not, I think not the point, right? It's just mainly because it's been a while since good Galactus or like a decent Galactus deck has been in the meta.
Yeah, I think I'm going a sort of different but similar thought process, which is I'm really worried about what this card does with Professor X. Where it's like you just gave
Mm,
every Professor X deck a 2/6. And it's like,
true.
oh, that's a problem. Because they're gonna like slap the prof in that lane. You can't fill it up, you're dead. It's like, oh, they just have a 2/6 now. And it's just like, oh, that seems like a potential problem. And I think like when I think about what the clog decks are, and we'll get to this a little bit more later in the video, but clog decks in Snap rely around like two nexuses of power. The first is Sentry Annie, and the second is Profx Cannonball. And I think this is a much easier fit in Profx Cannonball reliant decks. There's like plenty of overlap there too. There are plenty of decks running all four of those cards. But I think this is just an extremely easy slot in to Profx Cannonball decks, and it on power will probably also go in the Sentry Annie decks. And so it's like this feels like a card in a strategy that is already quite powerful that is only getting stronger as White Widow is added to it. And I think it'll be a lot to hit the heights of Red Hulk. I think like Red Hulk is a card that I certainly underrated. White Widow was a card that I rated coming out of the data misers. Like this card seems really strong, and I don't want it to be as strong as it is. And so I think this card could be as good as like it could be of the level of Red Hulk that we're talking about here. However, it will by definition be more limited. This is an archetype role player, right? This is an in archetype all star. Red Hulk is just being played in a million different archetypes because a bunch of different archetypes want the ability to go super tall. So when you make the comparison between White Widow and Red Hulk, one of them is going to be more limited because this is more like this sort of feels like it's like the Angela of Clog, whereas Red Hulk is just generically applicable. And so getting Red Hulk means you have, you play it in a bunch of different stuff. Whereas getting this probably does not mean you play it in a bunch of different stuff. It kind of goes in an archetype.
Yeah, I also just want to add that I'm so glad that you called it the Widow's Kiss, which is actually the real name because I cannot remember for the life of me that it was called Widow's Kiss. I was about to call it, like, if you didn't say that, I was about to call it, like, the White Widow Rock or
The
something.
White Widow Rock. All right. So let's talk about the two nexuses of power, nexi, I guess, that are really changing the metagame as we know it. The way I have conceived of the metagame in past weeks has been you have your Angela Soup, you have your combo decks, and they are just doing stuff to each other, right? Sentry Annie, specifically. I think the first time we really saw this happen was in the Pixie Shell with Lady Deathstrike and all of that, have really changed how that dynamic works. And X Cannonball as well, which we'll get to a little bit later, have these packages have shown up to just be like, you know what? I'm bullying combo. I'm gonna bully combo. I'm gonna clog them up. I'm going to play a bunch of stuff with a bunch of power. I'm going to disrupt them in a meaningful way, whether that be with Spider Ham and Iceman and Sentry and Annie, or with Debris and Professor X and Cannonball. Like, whatever's happening is I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to beat up the combo decks. And because Sentry Annie and Prof. Seaball are such real plans otherwise, these decks also don't have terrible Angela Soup matchups, which means they've sort of effectively become a third pole in this metagame. Like, if I had to define what the metagame poles are right now, it's Angela Soup, it's combo decks, and then it's like either Sentry Annie or Prof. X Cannonball, but they're kind of the same thing. Like, it's its own little soup archetype down there. And I think that has really opened this metagame up. Like, I've said we were in a very open metagame before. Right now, I think you can play basically anything. And as long as you have a plan for those matchups, you will be in a really good spot. Like, we have decks on my tier list with Pixie, multiple Pixie decks on my tier list. There are Angela Thor decks coming out of the woodwork. People are playing Cerebro. There's everything right now. And I think that, like, it really does strike me how the metagame is evolving and just how good it is that they nerfed Thanos. Really, like, that's really striking me right now. So what are your thoughts on these Annie Sentry decks?
Yeah, so I came back from like a week-long vacation. I didn't touch the game for about a week, so I was expecting to come back to this game to just deal with Hella Wombo combo again. But like this Any Sentry, I call it the small junk package, like the small junk package that emerged. It's actually something that I like to do right now a lot compared to like even more so than the whole like Angela Soup stuff. Because the thing about this build, right, Any Sentry, and I also want to talk about Lady Deathstrike in particular, Any Sentry, Lady Deathstrike. These decks are actually like if you don't go the full clock route, you can go like a bit of a mid-range route as well, which I've been doing. You play some good cards, you play Any Sentry, Hood, and Lady Deathstrike. And that's a very powerful stats package, which also disrupts your opponent's side of the board, right? Like sending Voids over versus Tribunal, versus Hela clocks them. And also the thing about Lady Deathstrike, which I really like, with this build is that it's just another Annihilus sometimes because it is another way for you to blow up the void. Like you feel very comfortable playing Sentry on turn 4 right now because there's actually two ways in your deck to get rid of it very effectively. And the thing about the thing about Lady Deathstrike is that like versus combo decks, it does kill a lot of things. Like it kills Iron Man in Tribunal. In the Angela stuff decks, it does kills Angela sometimes. It kills the Jeff, it's very big deal. And a lot of little small things. Like I feel like this style of mid-range semi-clock, semi-stats, a bit of here and there deck, it's like the perfect balance to beat the Angela Soup stuff and also the combo stuff. So I feel like maybe not all the lists are super refined yet for this Any Sentry build. I'm pretty sure you can play like a lot of different styles of it, but like it's very well positioned right now because it does work versus everything. And yeah, I'm really glad that this is in the meta right now. I'm really enjoying playing this deck.
Let's talk about the other crushing 5 drops in the metagame right now, and that is Professor X Cannonball, which is basically the new Professor X Eliath, except it's actually, I think you could argue, a little bit stronger since you don't need to be winning that other lane. You actually just have to be winning the Professor X lane and, like, be within 8 while losing Prio on the other lane. Like, Cannonball is really damn good at his job right now. And I think, some of that is, Eliath got nerfed. We ended up playing different decks. But some of that is also like it took a very long time for it to be clear what Cannonball was good at doing. And I think I will say, I know there were people in my Discord who were saying, yo, Profx Cannonball, before he came out, it's going to be really good. And I got to say, I doubted them and I was wrong. Like, this stuff is great. This is the new Profx Eliath. It is another one of these, like the logic of Profx right now is with Daredevil, it can be good against both the Angela Soup and the combo decks, but the primary point is it just absolutely farms the combo decks. When you add stuff like Daredevil Cannonball in, it becomes a lot closer to like just we are locking this game up. We are 100% winning. My Daredevil wins. My Daredevil Profx wins one lane. My Cannonball wins another lane. The game is over, over, over. And that just the ability to just like pure scam a game out against Angela Soup or whatever is very important, genuinely. And like Cannonball right now is very good at doing what that is. I think it's like overall probably a little bit less powerful than Sentry Annie. So when I talked about this on my tier list, I was like, this is the Annie Sentry Nexus, not the Profx Cannonball Nexus, but there's a ton of overlap there, and they're attacking the metagame in very similar ways. And so dealing with these kind of things, what are your thoughts on it, Lamby?
Yeah, so I'm also quite a big fan of this whole Professor X Cannonball attack into some decks right now. Also, it's really because like, so once you secure the Professor X lane, which is quite doable because like you play early tempo stuff, then you prof them, whatever. The Cannonball is like a very safe GGWP because firstly it cannot get shanked, and secondly, if you don't have prio, outside of obviously getting a Eliath, you get to push away whatever they intend to play in the location to beat you there, right? Because it's gonna be the biggest thing. And adding 5/8 power to your location in Cannonball and then removing their biggest thing usually wins a location, right? You can like with Cannonball, it's really just because once you lock up a lane with Professor X, your Cannonball literally just says that you don't care about like the other location. You just win the third one that you know you intend to win. That's what Cannonball offers to this kind of deck, and I really like it a lot. And also, yes, I'm not a big fan of Daredevil, but in this particular build, I feel like Daredevil just is stongs up. Like it just has like the ability to just know in this kind of build is just perfect. Like I played it a lot less than the Any Sentry stuff, mainly because I think the Any Sentry stuff is still a little bit more points. But like it's very close. And Prof X Cannonball is not really something you just play in junk, not really just something you play in you play it in so many things. Like you can play it in so many different decks, right? Like and also of course in junk it's crazy. Like Cannonball plus Demon is such a monster swing on turn 6, right? Like 5+1 that we talked about before. Yeah, I've personally been playing a bit more like I've just been playing Cannonball in like random decks and seeing how it turns out, and it's rarely bad.
Yeah, I think the thing with Cannonball that I
Rarely
think of,
bad. Yeah.
yeah, when I think of Cannonball, I'm just sitting here like, why did we miss on this card? And I feel like one of the major reasons we missed on this card was we were just playing. I think it's like 2 or 3 real ones. The first is people were just like, first of all, Thanos was around already and it was a better Profx deck and you didn't need Cannonball to do that. But then there's also like the fact that the thought process with Cannonball was this is like a Legion type card. And why
Mm,
would you ever run it instead of Vision, right? And so it took
yes.
a while for a metagame to develop. And I think a couple things happened, but the major one is like every deck started running Red Hulk. And so suddenly, if you are a deck that cannot beat a Red Hulk, you can Profx Cannonball the Red Hulk without priority. You win that lane. The Red Hulk goes to a lane where he does nothing or just dies. And that becomes like a dominant thing. The other thing is like Junk coming back into the meta in a real way, or Junk being not just, debris goblin stuff, but also the Professor X stuff we've talked about as a way of combating Clog. Or not as a way of combating Clog, as a way of combating combo, and that sort of dynamic has pushed Cannonball into the limelight as well. But I gotta say, like, there were people who got this right, and I don't think I was among them. So just, as always, the warning on when people are rating new cards is sometimes it takes a while for a card like this. Like, we're playing Pixie decks now. It took like a month. And that wasn't just us who thought Pixie was not very good. Like, I had Glenn Jones on my show, and he was like, yeah, I kind of think we need to, we missed low on Pixie and we might need to buff her. And I gotta say, no, don't do that.
No.
Don't do that. She's very good right now. And it's like, that means, like, if he's saying something like that, that means that even in the data, it was like, no, Pixie's not good. It just took a while for us to figure out how to actually play this card. And I think the same thing is happening with Cannonball right now, where it's like, it took a while, longer than the week he was on sale, for people to be like, I get what this guy is trying to do now. So let's talk about combo. From what I would say was probably an incredibly advantageous position, I think the Rise in Sentry Annie Prof Seaball stuff has actually made almost every combo deck unfavorable right now. I think there are not a lot of combo decks I would feel good playing. And obviously, you know, as a hater, I feel great about that. But I am, you know, intrigued by the way this metagame is developing, because last week I would say, you know, the most well-positioned decks were probably combo decks. And now I would say that of the three types of major types of decks that you could play in this metagame, they're the least well-positioned. And it just goes to show you how much a difference a week can make, because like these were decks that were absolutely dominating the metagame, and because they were so dominant, a whole new archetype arose to just be like, no, stop it. Stop doing this to me. And I think that's just really cool.
Yeah, so I think what happened was really back about a week or so ago, the combo decks were like the de facto better thing to do, because yes, combo decks naturally are a bit more inconsistent, but the thing is, when you do hit your pieces, the decks back then couldn't handle it, or like the Silky Smooth, the Angela stuff, the fair points decks couldn't handle like the power spike you would get from hitting your combo, right? So the combo things were like worth your while. But the moment something pops up that makes it not worth your while, like the Annihilus Sentry stuff, like the Professor X stuff, right? Combo just will disappear, because it's just naturally more inconsistent to do than just playing cards and playing stats, right? So now that we have the Any Sentry, Professor X Ball stuff, like the combo decks will just naturally like dissipate, because their ultimate game plan of hitting their pieces actually can get countered by you just playing your cards now, and your cards are like Sentry, Annihilus, Death Strike, Cannonball, Prof. So yeah, I'm actually quite happy that this is the place we're at right now, because like I'm a fan of combo to a certain extent, but I wasn't really a fan of the whole Hela thing, because it's non-interactive combo, right? It's non-interactive combo. It's not even within the control of the player playing the Hela deck a lot of the time, where their stuff is gonna land and all that kind of thing, and it's relatively uninteractive. So very glad we are in this current spot right now. And I think we mentioned it a few times in the previous topics as well. Like the meta right now is so open. Like you can play whatever. Like I'm not saying you cannot play your combo decks right now. You can, but you can expect to be countered as well. And like it's a big part of the meta. Like the big part of the meta right now is like decks that can play mid-range stats also can beat combo. And I think it's a healthy space right now, and I like it a lot.
So let's talk about the future of Angela Soup, because one of the things I keep thinking about is like, okay, so we've gone from Angela Soup to combo to this Prof X, Annie, Cannonball stuff, right? What happens if it turns out Angela Soup is just good into the Prof X stuff? Like, obviously, I think it's kind of thing that needs a little more time, and I don't think it is necessarily going to end up being good. But what happens if it is? Do we just end up back on, like, you know, I won't even call it Silky Smooth anymore, because I'm not even playing Silk in mine anymore. It's just gone. It's just like Angela, and they're like the move package is like Nightcrawler and Jeff, I guess. But like Angela, Hope, Kitty, you know, the Angela stuff. So where do we end up in a metagame that sort of cycles between those? Do you think it's more likely that we cycle back to Angela, or that something else pops up to deal with the combo, or not the combo stuff, the Clog stuff, the Prof X stuff, the Annie stuff? Do you think it's more likely that problem gets solved with tools we know, or tools we have not yet discovered?
Okay, so I'm gonna make a prediction here. I could be really wrong, but I don't think so. Okay, so the prediction is that I feel like with the existence of decks that could beat the combo stuff in the Any stuff, the Prof stuff, I do not think we will go back to a combo dominated meta, because I feel like mentioned earlier, the moment there is a deck out there that can consistently like stop the combo decks from doing their thing, even if they're high roll, and which there is right now, those decks won't be a part of the meta very often because they're naturally more inconsistent, which means the Angela stuff will have their time to shine again. Like it's just because the Angela stuff, well, wasn't really that good into the combo stuff, so that's why they disappeared for a bit, right? But now that like the combo stuff is a bit down, the Angela stuff actually has a really good time into like the C-ball decks, the Sentry and Nihilus decks, because your early game is like relatively a bit stronger, right? Because Angela is just a beast versus like mid-range stats, right? And then you have Elsa as well, and then you have Hope, you can cheat out stuff, and then with your mid-range stats. So I feel like it could be one of those like even fights between like the Annie, Sentry, C-ball stuff, and then the Angela stuff, and then it's gonna be like a very close matchup. I don't exactly know which is 100% favored in that matchup. I think it's gonna be like very, very close. And I think I like that because you're actually interacting, you're fighting with your opponent. You're not just like doing your own thing and your opponent cannot do anything, you know. I feel like these two types of decks, the ones that we mentioned earlier, plus the Angela Soup, and then now the Angela Soup, like these decks can fight. Like they actually will fight with each other and it will be a battle. And I think that's Marvel Snap. That's better Marvel Snap, right? Like you're actually playing against your opponent and not just playing your own hand regardless. So yeah, I'm optimistic that this whole Angela Soup thing will rise a little bit again, and it will be fun because you actually get to play versus your opponent.
I think the funniest thing about this to me is I have multiple decks built that are using just either Sentry Annie or Prof X Cannonball in the Angela Soup shell.
It works too.
Yeah,
It works too.
I have multiple built where I'm just like, I need to figure out if this makes sense. Because I like the Sentry Annie one, I know that makes sense. That's just the Dark Hawk Rock version of the Angela deck, right? Like that does exist. It does make sense. But I need to figure out whether we could just like play Prof X Cannonball on the Angela Soup decks and that just ends up being awesome. Because like that kind of stuff, like there's like hybridization between these archetypes that can still happen that I think is likely a little bit unexplored at the moment. And I don't know if it's actually a real thing, right? It's kind of a like I'm very wary of theory crafting where it's like this sounds good, but does it actually match up well into the meta? But I will say, that sounds good.
I do think that that's very possible, because if you look at what Thanos used to do with Professor X, it's just like early stats into Prof. Like the Angela
Yeah.
stuff is early stats into Prof, and then obviously you can just Red Hawk somewhere else. So I think it's something very possible. Also, do let us know what, because I asked you this question like a bit before the recording. Why do we call this Angela Soup? Why is it soup?
It's habit for me because like there's this thing in Magic where like when there's like a core of just like a bunch of good mid-range cards that you like then put stuff around, you call it like that soup. So like there's a deck where it's like, like I think the most famous one is a deck called like Blue Soup, where it's just like all the best blue cards in the game. And so it's just like this is in an eternal format. So over the course of Magic's history, there have been so many insanely good blue cards. And so like you're just like, what are you playing? I'm playing Blue Soup. And you like that unfortunately does give you an idea of what it actually is. The same way when I say like I'm playing Angela Soup, it's Angela, it's Kitty, it's Elsa, it's Hope, it's probably a big guy in there, there's probably a Jeff in there. There's probably a Vision in there, or you're a Loki deck, right? Like they're all kind of doing the same thing, and I feel like it's easier to describe them as a group because their matchups tend to be so similar. Like you're the matchup of like there's differences in them, right? Like you're gonna have different matchups with Shuri Kitty than you will with basic Angela move stuff, but it's not different enough in terms of the spread that it is worth distinguishing between them when talking generally about the metagame. It's definitely worth distinguishing between them when you talk about them specifically. But when talking about their sort of corner of the metagame, you can actually sort of discuss them as a group because their matchups tend to be fairly similar. So people are complaining about Mill. What's up with that?
I mean, I'm not. Okay, so I've been the biggest non-mill lover since a long time, right? Since even when people started doing the whole Baron Zemo Cable Yondu thing. Because I feel like this deck, in my own words, is too cute. Like it doesn't try to win, it just tries to make your opponent lose, which is a very different thing. I know it's gonna sound weird, but like it doesn't win games, it just makes your opponent lose, which means that it actually doesn't have a win condition. It just does stuff. and then hope your opponent doesn't already have the stuff in hand, right? So because if they already have the stuff in hand, or you mill the wrong stuff, they get to draw the stuff that they need even more consistently. So I feel like mill is just mid, as the title says. It's very mid because like it's really just like not here or not there. Like it doesn't have a concrete like winning plan. And even if you execute your perfect curve of like burning cards from your opponent's deck, if they're already holding those cards, or you don't burn the exact cards, they draw their cards better, faster, or effectively your cards don't do anything. So I don't think this is a horrible deck because, like, at the end of the day, when it was wombo combo meta maybe a week or so ago, like this did have a good chance of hitting a lot of combo pieces, right? Because like a lot of these decks like Tribunal, you just hit any combo piece and then it hurts. Versus Phoenix Force, you hit the Phoenix, it hurts a lot. Hit the Nimrod, it hurts a lot. You hit the Hela, it hurts a lot. Like you burn them from the deck. So like yeah, it did have its time to shine a little bit. Even then, it wasn't fantastic. It was just like okay, it has some purpose then and there. But now when the meta is a bit more like mid-rangey again, like just big stats cards, and you don't really like the people playing against the mill deck now care less about what specifically gets milled, because at the end of the day, all your cards do their own thing very often. I mean, obviously sometimes you play Sentry and then they burn your Annihilus. That's a bit unfortunate. Now you still have Lady Deathstrike. But like my point is that like it's a lot less about like burning the right cards when you play against these decks right now, because these decks don't really care what you get rid from their deck because all their cards do something, right? So on their own. So I think yeah, now mill is effectively back to being mid, and like maybe even worse than mid in my opinion.
I did a video on mill, and I
Yeah.
did pretty well with it. Good ranks, all that. It was fine. But like what I eventually realized retrospectively about that video was it the mill that was winning me games, or was it Daredevil Profx Cannonball? And the answer is like it's probably the Daredevil Profx Cannonball, right? Like mill has some good stats. Being able to play Gladiator is cool, but like fundamentally, what I'm doing is Professor X and then either Cannonball or Red Hulk. And it's like, you know
Yep.
what? That there might be better places to do that. Like, yes, they can carry mill to being an actual deck, and I think it does genuinely do that because, like, yeah, that's really good. Like, you can, like, as long as you have some stats in there, that kind of strategy can absolutely carry you to being an actual deck. But I don't know for a fact whether or not it is its own strategy or just a subsection of, you know, the stuff we've already talked about being very good right now. So with all this Clog running around, where's Destroy?
Well, destroy is in that weird place whereby it's supposed to be good against your voids, your Annihilus stuff, your debris, your rocks, your whatever. It's supposed to be good, and it is. But the problem with where destroy is right now is that nothing changed in terms of the deck's consistency. In fact, I feel like with a lot of decks doing what they're doing right now, yes, Destroy will win these decks if like they send over a void, you're holding onto a Carnage, blah blah blah. Like it will work. But the thing is, Destroy has the problem of suffering from this thing whereby you need to draw in a nice, like very nice order. Like your decks need to draw in a very like nice order to set up, right? Like you can't open with nulls and deaths and no destroy. You gotta open with the destroys and then top deck the nulls and deaths. So like it's just the problem with destroy in general, which is you need to draw your deck in a very specific order. So I feel like as much as this is a topic, I feel like the answer is very clear, which is it does work well into the into like the Nihilus stuff, the clock stuff, but inherently the deck is just more inconsistent than like the other decks, and that's the reason why I feel like it's not like really doing much right now, because even though it works, it doesn't work often enough, right?
I think there's another factor too, where it's like
Okay.
the first one is you don't want to be playing destroy cards on turn 6. Your turn 6 wants to be like null plus
True.
whatever, right? And you also want to be playing those destroy cards earlier to blow up Deadpools and X-23s, right? Like
True.
that's when you want to be playing that Deathlock, right? But and you never want to be doing that on 6. The other thing that you run into is you're also like as a deck that is sending a lot of its power back to hand some of the time. You end up pretty vulnerable to Profx Cannonball. Like
True.
not 100% vulnerable to Profx Cannonball, but like you can lose to that really really badly if especially if they have a Daredevil. And so like for a deck that's supposed to be a counter deck to Clog, it ends up being like not that. Like it ends up being like they're the specific dynamics of how it plays out. The fact that there's so much Professor X in these decks, the fact that that prevents you from doing it, the fact that you don't want to play destroy cards on turn 6, you end up in kind of an awkward spot. You really do. Like it's not like the worst thing in the world, but like for a matchup that you're supposed to be good in, you're kind of not good against the specifics of the dynamic, right? There's like this is
Yeah.
it's like a theory crafting versus reality thing where it's like in theory this makes so much sense, but when you play the matchup out, you're just like, oh wait, like the specifics here make it very awkward for me, despite the fact that it should match up well.
Yeah, I just want to take this time to shout out one card, which okay, so I want to shout out Red Guardian. Do you know how good it feels to Red Guardian a Deadpool? Like, oh my
I've
god,
never
it
done it.
feels.
I've literally
I've done
never
it
done it.
so many times. Like, it feels okay, not so many times. In the times that I did play Red Guardian versus Destroy, like,
Yeah.
okay, so my point is that since this topic is pretty much like solved right now, I just want to say that Red Guardian, guys, it's not like Red Hawk levels of like bam
It's just
OP,
good.
but like I just feel so happy playing the card on turn 3. Like, it's not bad. You play it on turn 3, it becomes a 3/5, whatever you invalidate. And then if you invalidate something relevant like a Angela, like a Jeff, like a sometimes Cerebro, oh, that one feels really good. Like, you get what I'm trying to say. Like,
No,
just a
it's just a
card.
good
It's just,
card. I will.
awesome.
It's just generically like, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's good.
Such a feels good card. Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, no, just wanted to
The
put it out
issue it's
there.
gonna have, I think this is worth talking about. I'm willing to tangent on this because Red
Okay.
Guardian is a card that when this comes out is still gonna be in spotlights. So people are gonna be wondering, do we need to buy Red Guardian, right? And I honestly think that this is like a luxury card where it's
It
like
is.
if you already have the archetypes built, this will make them better. But it's like a really good luxury card.
Very good
This is not a
luxury.
card you need to target before something like,
Red Hulk?
Annihilus or Red Hulk. Yeah, it's not on that level, right? Like Annihilus, Red Hulk, High Evo, all that stuff, you care way more about being able to play it. But like if you already have all the archetypes in the game, if you can already play most of the stuff, like I can see this card having not necessarily a cannonball like trajectory, because I don't think it's going to be exactly like that. But like this is going to be a card where you're just going to be like, oh man, there's a lot of people playing this. Like, there's a lot of.
Yeah,
I'm net decking a deck and I'm missing the Red Guardian from it, right?
I
And
have
it's
such a
not going to be
cool
that bad.
analogy for this one. Yeah, like I
Sure.
recently just came back from vacation, and then like this is like that moment where you've exchanged like foreign currency, and then you have a little bit left before you take the flight, and then you're just like, oh, I don't want to like bring this extra currency back. Should I just spend it? Yeah, then you just spend it on Red Guardian because it's just a good purchase. Yes.
Yeah, he's just kind of good. Like he's just kind of good. He's not an archetype enabler in and of himself, but he's just like, oh, you don't have a 12th card for your deck? I got you, buddy. A
I
lot
got
of
you.
him being good, though, I will say, is because every deck is built to dodge Shang right now.
Yeah.
Like there's just like a spot in all these decks because like we're not playing Shang in our Prof X Cannonball decks. We're not playing Shang in our Sentry and Eyeless decks because what are we hitting with him? Like it's Sentry, it's Red Hulk when you don't have priority some of the time, and then it's like just nothing else, right? Like there's just it's kind of a shocking amount of lack of Shang right now. So I have seen like Red Guardian showing up in that context, and I do wonder if it's just like one of those things where it's like, well, when Shang comes back, Red Guardian goes away, maybe? I don't really know. But right now, I would say he's just like generically good, a very solid 12th card in decks if you don't know what you're doing, but not so solid that you can't replace him with like Polaris or whatever.
On that note, do you know what's the very solid red card? Find out in the next topic.
I don't like talking about nerfs. I don't like advocating for nerfs. I feel like when I, as someone with a platform, use my platform to be like, hey, I think you should nerf this card, it's generally awkward because, I think for me, I can talk about it in a balanced perspective, but I don't have to worry about the economic ramifications of it, right? When this card gets nerfed, if my purchase gets invalidated, that's fine with me. I can play everything else. If someone who just bought Red Hulk and it gets nerfed, purchase gets invalidated, that might be their only 6,000 token purchase for a while, right? That said, I think we have to talk about nerfing Red Hulk, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it would be fair to do. I probably wouldn't do it just because I'm very afraid of doing that. But I have two pitches for where this makes sense or what I would do with Red Hulk. Pitch number one, you start him at 612 and reduce the gain to +3. Pitch number two, you keep the gain as it is now, but he's like a 6-9. I think.
I like pitch one quite a bit. Yeah.
Sure.
I
What
like
are your
pitch one.
thoughts on both of those?
Yeah, so firstly, what I call Red Hawk right now, based on my games on stream, based on my testing, like to me, Red Hawk is about like 12 energy worth of power, like because it's very often two magnetos, man. Like it's like 624, 623. It's crazy. Like I think Red Hawk in terms of power level, like people always ask me what's the replacement for Red Hawk in some of these mid-range decks, and I can't really find a replacement because like there is no card that outputs 623 worth of power and you can still play turn 5. The other card's infinite and you have to skip turn 5. So like I feel like Red Hawk now is like super strong. Like you just play it in most decks. Like I feel like the Pixie decks play it, the Annihilus decks play it, the Professor decks play it, the Angela stuff plays it as well. Like everything plays it. So it's just like one card solo allocation. And I like the first pitch you made, which is like 612 and then +3. It will still see play and it wouldn't really invalidate people's like 6,000 token purchase because I
Yeah.
feel like it's still gonna be like 621 because now it's 624, 623, so it's like what 621 right now if you enough
It
it
would
to.
end up being like 620 in the spaces it was 623. And like I think you could
Yeah.
argue that's not enough of a nerf. Like sorry, 621. Yeah, you're right. Like it's like I don't know. Maybe you could argue that's not enough of a nerf. I don't want it to be that significant though. I
Same.
want to just like chop a little off the top, right? Like maybe I think 6-9 also does this, right? It's the same outcome, right? Instead of being a 623, you end up at a 621. But I think you could argue like that's really like sort of the ballpark here is like how do we chop a little off the top and keep the card exciting? And my instinct is the way to keep the card exciting is you started at a higher base power and drop the gain. But maybe the way to keep the card exciting is you keep the gain, the unique part of the card, and then you drop its base power to like 6-8 or something, right? It's like I feel like I want this guy to be a a 618 if I can get it. That's where I want him to be. I want him to be like a 618, 19, 20. I never want him to get that much past that number. Or like
Yeah.
that's what I want him to be at. And I don't really have a good way of making sure that happens. But I think what we can say is like, if they skip 2 turns worth of plays, he should be in the 618 range, right? And both of those changes accomplish that. If he goes 6-9 plus 4, he will be a 617. If he goes 612 plus 3, he will be a 618, right? And I think that's really where I want him to be, right? Because if you're skipping 3 turns and staying in against a Red Hulk, I feel like you deserve it, right? If you're skipping three
Yes.
turns and you're seeing the Red Hulk grow and you're like, okay, I guess I'm gonna stay, like, yeah, fine. But like I
You
think I
deserve
think
it, yeah.
skipping 2 turns is like a very reasonable, like that's where I want the break point to be for him. And so
Mm.
making sure that is like 17 instead of like right now it is 19 if they skip 2 turns. Like just
Yes.
dropping that down to like 17, 18 in most situations. I do feel like, it doesn't matter. 1 point doesn't matter as much on something as big as him, but 1 point does matter and 2 points do matter. And I think I want to keep this card having the identity that it has. And I don't want people's purchases to get invalidated. So I want to do like a light touch here. And like those are the
Yeah.
two situations I'm really thinking of. Because like I don't think we can take it to like, 614 plus 2. I think that's just a much less exciting card. I don't
Mhm.
really think we can go to like, 6-7 plus 5 or anything like that. That just feels more punishing. So I'm not really sure what else we can do other than drop its base power, keep the effect the same, drop the effect, give it a little bit of base power. Not sure.
I really want to know what people think about this one in the comments because I feel like there's a lot of ways you can like change this card without completely destroying it. There's like this is one of those cards whereby the power of the card, like the stats of the card, is like really everything, right? So I feel like the actual change. Okay, this is obviously not confirmation, but I do think the change to Red Hawk will come soon, eventually,
Really?
maybe.
Why?
I really think because I think this card is really at its current state right now is like super powerful, and I want it to be a bit less powerful, but I don't want it to be unplayed. I feel like this card being played is good, just that not at its current power level because it's a bit too much. So I feel like it's really interesting to see what they might eventually do to this. I think it will happen, by the way. I just have no idea, but I want to see something change with this card.
Yeah, I kind of don't. I think it's doing good stuff for the meta right now, and you know how I hate talking about nerfs like this because like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like sometimes I might be responsible where like I'll say something and like people will be like, ah, we have to complain about that on social media. But I do feel good because I don't think they've ever made a nerf because of social media sentiment. They've made nerfs because things aren't fun, but that's not measured by social media sentiment, right? Like, and so I think it's fine for me to talk about this. I think Red Hulk is maybe like 1 or 2 points of power off. We'll see if he's more than 1 or 2 points of power off. I guess they would know, not me. But right now, what he's doing effectively is Eliath. He's being Eliath because he's too big. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but yeah, he's the biggest guy. And once again, a giant guy has come out, and I have underestimated him. It happens every time. It happens every single time. They release any 6-drop that's like a 620 something, and I'm like, I don't know, it's only 1 lane, and then it ends up being really good, and I'm an idiot. It happened again.
But you're the strong guy. How can you see that?
I don't know, man. Oh, that's a long ass episode. Fuck. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that video. I know it was a little bit longer than usual. I didn't expect that, but I just looked at the timer and I was like, oh, damn. So, thank you so much. I've been KM Best. He's been Lamby Series. Lamby, take us out.
If you guys like what you just saw, and you saw a long one this time, do like, comment, and subscribe, and you will see me and KM on the next one on my channel. Bye-bye.